Today, we're jumping into a really provocative sermon by a 20th century thinker named Harry Emerson Fosdick. He points his finger at what he believes is the single biggest rival to Christian principles in our modern world, and you might be surprised by what it is. So let's get right into it.
So let me just ask you straight up. If you had to name the biggest challenge, the most powerful idea competing with Christianity today, what would you pick? Would it be another world religion? Or maybe a political ideology? Just give it a thought. Well, according to Fosdick, the answer is probably not what you'd expect. He makes the case that Christianity's most dangerous competitor isn't another faith, but something that feels a lot closer to home for most of us, the modern idea of nationalism. And that's the core argument we're going to unpack here. Now, to build his case, Fosdick doesn't start with modern politics. Instead, he takes us way back, almost 2,000 years, to a story from the biblical book of Acts. He says this ancient showdown actually gives us the perfect frame for understanding the problem today. See, when the Apostle Paul was attacked, listen to the reason why. The complaint wasn't religious. It wasn't, hey, we believe in different gods. The objection was totally nationalistic. It was a clash of cultures, and it all came down to their identity of being Romans. For Fosdick, this was just a preview of a conflict that was going to get a whole lot bigger over the next few centuries. Okay, but before we go any further, we have to get something really clear. Fosdick is not attacking patriotism itself. No, he's super careful to draw a line between what he sees as a good, healthy loyalty and something else he thinks is a twisted and dangerous ideology.
So on the one hand, you have what he calls fine nationalism. He says it's like the love you have for your family. It's this deep, specific connection. And when it's healthy, it actually helps you get why someone else loves their family or their country just as much. But then, on the other hand, there's what he calls the dogma of nationalism. This, he says, is totally different. It's a modern invention that basically acts like a rival religion, one that demands your total, unquestioning allegiance. This is the thing he's taking aim at.
So what does this rival religion actually preach? Well, Fosdick boils it down to a three-part creed. The core beliefs that define the whole system. Let's walk through them. First up, the idea that every nation is its own little universe, totally sovereign, answering to no one and nothing except its own desires. From there, you get the state claiming almost absolute power over its citizens, their money, their lives, and maybe most importantly, their conscience, especially when war's on the table. And the final piece of the puzzle? To justify all this power, the dogma relies on one powerful emotion, the belief that your nation is just better, superior, the greatest, on whatever point matters most to you. Yeah, that third point is really the engine that makes the whole thing run. This claim to absolute authority just doesn't work unless people truly believe in their own unique greatness. And as Fosdick points out, this is not a rare thing at all. I mean, you see this belief popping up everywhere in history. For someone like the British imperialist Cecil Rhodes, it was simple. His people were the greatest people. It wasn't just the British, of course. For the philosopher Voltaire, it was all about the supreme, unmatched taste of the French. And then, to really bring it home for his listeners, Fosdick shares this quote from an American diplomat who basically said his nation was God's masterpiece, with no equal. So this belief in your own group supremacy, Fosdick says, is a key ingredient in this dogma. Okay, so now that we've laid out what this dogma of nationalism is, we get to the core of his whole argument. This is where the rubber meets the road. Fosdick lays out three specific ways that this nationalist creed goes head-to-head with core Christian principles. The first clash is all about God. Fosdick argues that this kind of nationalism makes it impossible to believe in one God who is for all of humanity. Instead, you end up with a bunch of little tribal gods, each one rooting for their own team. And Mark Twain's biting satire, The War Prayer, just nails this idea perfectly. It's so powerful because it shows you the brutal, ugly thing people are actually praying for during a war. They're asking a supposedly universal God to help them slaughter another group of his own children. To Fosdick, that's not praying to the one true God. That's praying to a tribal war god who's picked a side. All right, conflict number 2 boils down to one question. Who's the boss? The nationalist dogma says that when push comes to shove, the state is the ultimate authority. But for a Christian, your conscience, your loyalty to God has to come first. And right there, you have a direct collision. Fosdick points out that this is an old fight. I mean, the early Christians were persecuted. Why? Not because of their beliefs, but because they refused to say the state was the supreme authority by worshiping Caesar. And he gives more recent examples too, like Abraham Lincoln and James Russell Lowell, who both stood up and basically said, nope, my country is wrong on this when it came to the Mexican War, choosing their conscience over the popular demand.
And his third point of conflict is maybe the most devastating. He argues that by putting the nation-state first, you essentially neuter Christianity. You turn it into a private belief, a nice story, instead of what Fosdick says it's supposed to be, a plan for real change in the real world. He says the logical endpoint of every nation acting like it's the absolute boss is this: international anarchy. It's a world where every country is a sovereign unit, free to do whatever it wants, build up armies, declare war, with no higher power to keep things in check. In a system like that, war isn't just a possibility, it's inevitable. And that reality makes Christianity's mission of peace and brotherhood pretty much impossible to achieve.
And all of this leads us to Fosdick's final provocative point. He basically frames this whole thing as a choice you have to make between two completely different systems of loyalty, two rival religions.
So, just to recap his argument, this dogma of nationalism is so dangerous because it messes with the very core of Christian principles. It breaks the one God into a bunch of tribal gods, it crushes the freedom of your own conscience, and it turns the faith into a nice little story instead of a powerful force for good in the world.
And then he brings it all home, circling right back to that story we started with. He says the spirit of those men in ancient Philippi, the ones who rejected a new idea simply because it didn't fit with their national identity, well, that spirit is not dead. That old cry of "it's not lawful for us because we are Romans" is still echoing today.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question to wrestle with, doesn't it? Fosdick is clear that a healthy love for your country is a good thing, but his whole sermon is a warning that there's a line, a point, where that loyalty can turn into a dogma, a rival faith. And the challenge he leaves hanging in the air is for all of us to figure out, where exactly is that line?